Back at it with the Kaufman Corner podcast with you, as always, the good doctor, Dr. Rany Jazayerli, one of the co-founders of Baseball Prospectus. I'm Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB. Thank you for joining us. If you're catching us via the podcast later in the week, you can be a part of the conversation. Usually it's Sunday nights at 10 o'clock that we stream live. Already got a bunch of people in the chat room. Looking forward to getting to some of their comments as well. We can get to yours as well. Much to cover here tonight. The Royals do get 4 All-Stars, first time since 2016. What does that mean for the organization now and moving forward? Where's our playoff optimism meter? Oh, the metrics people don't like the Royals' chances of getting in the playoffs. Salvador Perez collects his 1500th hit. What does that mean for his Hall of Fame chances? Is Brady Singer elite? He's certainly been looking like it lately. Kris Bubic is back. What's his best role in the bullpen? Walter Pennington being sent back down. Quick, here it is. We've been talking about it for a while. Take a look. Now, some wave goodbye. Maikel Garcia's OPS hovering around a little over 600 and a big series looming with the Boston Red Sox. We're talking about it right now here on the Kaufman Corner podcast.
You're listening to Kaufman Corner, the most in-depth analysis of the Kansas City Royals, breaking down the Royals like no one else can. Kaufman Corner is hosted by Rany Jazayerli and Soren Petro. Rany is a co-founder of Baseball Prospectus, author of Rany on the Royals, and former columnist for Grantland, The Ringer, and The Athletic. Soren is the award-winning afternoon drive host of the program on Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. Kaufman Corner is proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot. Now, here's your hosts, Rany Jazayerli and Soren Petro.
Thank you very much, Curtis. We do appreciate it. Off and running, Rany, on what was a disappointing week. 2-4, the boys in blue go against the Tampa Bay Rays, who have been, okay, not as good as they were supposed to be, but middling around 500-ish, and then the Colorado Rockies, which I suppose if you wanted to be the ultimate optimist, you could say, well, it's Colorado. That's freaky things. Everybody can be a little bit wonky when they go to Colorado, but not the week that we were all hoping for. We'll get more into that here in a second. However, we did get good news this afternoon, and that is that the Kansas City Royals will have 4 All-Stars, and there's no Mark Redmonds in this bunch. 4 very deserving All-Stars for this ball club. We could maybe even find a way to, I could sell you on a 6th or a 5th, a little bit, but your reaction to them getting the 4 All-Stars.
Yeah, no, it's good news. It is a testament to not only the player development from within, but also really a testament to what JJ Picollo has done best, which is kind of rebuild this rotation without expending enormous amounts of resources. I mean, the 4 All-Stars, it's the most the Royals have had since 2016. So that right there is a really, an impressive indicator. But what I really thought was striking is this is the first time in Royals history they have had 2 starting pitchers make the All-Star team. And when you think about, some of the history of great Royals starting pitching, great rotations, the 85 rotation, really from 85 through 94, and from Saberhagen and Lee Brand on one side to like Kevin Appier and David Cohn on the other. I found it pretty hard to believe that they never had 2 guys make the team in the same year. Mark Gubicz was in there. He made the team at one point. I guess maybe Saberhagen didn't make it that year. But that to me was a real eye-opener. And when you think about how they got both of those guys, neither of those all-star pitchers were in the organization 13 months ago. And the cost of getting Cole Reagans and Seth Lugo was Aroldis Chapman and a 3-year, $45 million free agent contract. And they have, Seth Lugo leads the American League in innings, leads the American League in ERA, leads the American League in wins above replacement, in wins if you want to go that route. Like he right now, what we'll find out here hopefully in the next few days, but there's a very good chance he will start the All-Star game for the American League. That one I thought was a no-brainer. I wasn't sure that Reagans would make it. I actually thought I was worried he would not. He's not in the top 10 in the league in ERA, but I think, people who made the decision looked beyond just runs and looked at his peripheral numbers. He's third in the league in FIP because I think he's second or third in the league in strikeouts, a tremendous strikeout rate. I mean, obviously he hasn't given up a home run over the fence in fair territory in his last couple of starts, no matter what the umpires in New York think. But a very legitimate, a starting pitcher. And we've discussed all season, we can't decide between Seth Lowe and Cole Riggins ourselves. So I have both of those guys make the team. And then obviously, this is going to be Bobby Witt's emergence on the national stage. This is going to be a chance for him to really show off. But this is something that's been anticipated really since he was drafted 5 years ago. And we're not just talking all-star game for him. We're talking MVP consideration. So the top end of talent in this organization right now on this roster is elite. And you could argue that the fact that they're only 49 and 43 is a kind of a testament to what the rest of the roster looks like. But it is very much a stars and scrubs roster. And you hope that it's a lot easier to replace the scrubs than it would be to find stars. The Royals have top end talent. They just need to supplement it to make themselves into a contender the rest of the season.
Well, I think it continues to validate what we got excited about. You mentioned the Cole Riggins part of the equation, where these people are coming from. They've got a trade, they've got a free agent, they've got a homegrown, and then they've got an iconic player that they've paid over the years in Salvador Perez. So a couple of homegrowns and Brady Singer and
a Latin American guy and a draft, a guy from the draft. So it's a good mix of player acquisition models.
I would love it if there was a young Latin American player, right? Like it's been a cold run until Maikel Garcia. We've already had some comments, questioning Maikel Garcia, which we'll get to a little bit later on. But it does speak to the organization. This is like national validation that the organization is going in a better direction. I'll say the right direction to this point. We're going to find out if they're a playoff team. We're going to find out if they're a championship team. That's very hard to do, but they're clearly going in the right direction, and this will nationally validate them, and there will be some national coverage if anybody bothers to watch the All-Star game. Do you even know what channel it's on?
No, I have no idea. I was, I believe I saw David Lesky hint that Bobby Witt might be in the home run derby.
I hope not.
I will say, in the last 30 years, the only Royal I can think of making the home run derby was it just Billy Butler?
Salvador Perez.
Salvi's done it once, I think, as well. Did Jorge Soler make it one year? I can't remember for sure. I mean, I think for Bobby to make it, especially, you don't think of him having an elite power season. But you know what? I probably would tune in for that. And you talk about, not knowing the station that the All-Star game is on. I'll at least have the All-Star game on in the background sometimes, but I almost never watch the home run derby, even if they changed the format over the years. So, but Bobby Witt going up against the titans of the sport would actually be something I think I would tune in for. So the Royals are making noise in terms of, a national stage, in terms of having star talent, not just in terms of performance, but in terms of, image, national image. Like, Bobby Witt Jr. is a name in the sport. The sport is promoting Bobby Witt Jr. It's not just that he's playing well. The sport, the Major League Baseball is putting him out there, trying to make him into a star. And I think that's kind of fun because that's not something we see very often in Kansas City.
By the way, you are being reminded, Tony says, Billy didn't make the home run derby. That was the big.
No, you're right.
We all that was Robinson Cano.
Yes, Robinson Cano. That's why I tuned in, because I wanted to see Robinson Cano get booed. Forgive me. Yes, it was more of a story when he didn't make the All-Star game.
Tyler reminds us this is true. Mike Moustakas made it. He was in there and was out in the first round. I'm with this. I don't want Witt messing up his swing. That for me is kind of an issue because I've seen some guys kind of go that direction, and I don't think he's a home run hitter. I don't think he has the kind of swing that fits in the home run derby. Salvador Perez does. I didn't worry about Salvador Perez being in it because that's what he does. He tries to lift the ball and hit it over the wall. I think Bobby Witt Jr. tries to hit the ball hard every time. And I think you can get a little bit out of whack in that kind of thing. By the way, for my money on the home run derby, pick some rules and stick to it. Like, I'm tired of them changing every year. Like, I would like there to be some records. I think the home run derby could be a thing if you could be like, that's the most ever in a round. Since we quit screwing around and picked one goddamn set of rules, like that's the most we've ever had. That drives me crazy. And the All-Star game itself, just the fans don't seem to be into it anymore. The game just seems very spring training-esque. and how they go about doing it. So I used to love the All-Star game. I used to cry when the American League would lose every year when I was a child, and it sucked because the Royals were good and we had a lot of guys in it, and then they would always lose, and I hated it because I always wanted the American League.
I remember the feeling, but I'll tell you, you know what really ruined the All-Star game, basically, irrevocably, was interleague play. Once the American League and National League teams started playing each other, which was I think 1996, I want to say, that was what made the All-Star game so special. Is these players never took the field against each other, except in the World Series. Two teams met, but it's hard if anybody under the age of 30, 35, it's hard to understand what that meant. Imagine, if in the NBA, the Western Conference and Eastern Conference never played, if the AFC and NFC never played except in the finals, that was baseball for 100 years. It's hard to even fathom that, but I think that was, I don't think it was a coincidence that baseball's All-Star game had by far the most cachet of any of those other sports because of that. Like the Pro Bowl, I mean, it's a joke. The NBA All-Star game has been a glorified exhibition for decades, but the All-Star game in baseball meant something because there was actually pride in playing for your league because you never fraternized with the enemy. And now, I mean, especially now with the DH, there's no longer a DH difference. There are 46 interleague games. The Royals will literally play every single National League team this year, either at home or on the road, but they play every team every year. There's benefits to that. You get to see all the stars around baseball. But what you lose is the All-Star game just doesn't mean as much as it used to.
Yeah. Speaking of all-stars, GAN Asphalt and Concrete, all-stars when it comes to handling your parking lot issues, no matter what it is, whether it's small and seemingly trivial or the biggest thing like building the entire lot. GAN Asphalt and Concrete is a full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor. One contractor, all things parking lots, nationally recognized, making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Don't risk liability in your parking lot. Get it brightly striped. Get it taken care of now. Leave a great first impression and last impression with your customers and clients. Find them online at ganasphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Make sure you tell them you heard about it here on the Kaufman Corner podcast. GAN Asphalt and Concrete. One contractor, all things parking lot. Again, ganasphalt.com. The game sucks. It's not what it used to be, but the 4 does validate what's going on. We cover that. How many do you think they get? If you had to look into your crystal ball, how many do they get next year?
How many All-Stars?
Like how much is of this? Like, do you think Seth Lugo's now a perennial All-Star?
Right. So Bobby, perennial All-Star, right? Like if I had to guess, I'm getting the over/under on his career. I'd probably be around 10. I mean, it's, he's 24 years old. This is not going to be his last, I don't think. Salvi, I mean, as long as he's somewhat productive, like we talk about last year, he was the Royals' only All-Star. So that's progress. But, I mean, his numbers at the All-Star break last year were not nearly as good as they are this year. But, like, partly the Royals, yes, they needed a representative on a 29 and 75 team or whatever. But he has ascended to that level of, like, statesman of the game. He's been at that position representing the All-Star game for a decade now. So Salvi, if he's still productive, will probably be on the team. Lugo, I still think long-term Cole Reagans is probably the guy I'd bet on over Lugo. So I'll say 3 there. The question is, do they have another one? And Lugo could make it. I mean, there's always a chance of a reliever. Like I would say 4 just because, you just need one reliever to have like, an insanely hot first half. Vinny Pasquantino could have a really elite, first half of the season. I'd be surprised if they had more than 4, but let's say 3 or 4.
I put the over/under at like 2.25. Like I think it needs to be more than 2, but I'm like, it's not. I would lean to the 2 over going over. Like 2.5 would obviously be. I know how lines work. Because I think you feel like Bobby Witt Jr. and Cole Reagans are going to be there, but pitchers get hurt. I feel like they've got some other good arms. I think Brady Singer, you could make a case for being there this year.
Yeah, very close.
I think what he's doing looks like he could be the guy that if Seth Lugo regresses back to just being very good and not all-star caliber, I think Brady Singer could be there. I don't see the reliever, but they can come out of nowhere.
Right, exactly. That's what I'm saying, is that you might just get a reliever randomly. Singer, I'm like you said, I mean, we're not making enough of just how close he probably came. I mean, especially after they probably had already decided the team before he took them out today. But 7 innings in Colorado, allowing 1 run. His ERA, I think, dropped under 3.
I don't think he probably got any real consideration. He should have, like, his name was probably kicked around. They're like, the Royals have already got this many.
Right.
Like, enough. right? Like we got to get some other people on there. But he very easily could have been. I mean, ERA's below 3, and we can get into that if you want right now, but or we can go to the playoff optimism meter. But I am interested in where we are on Singer, because it's been 2 really good starts. He had 5 innings of 1-run ball earlier in the week. I mean, I think there's a lot to chew on there. You want to go with Singer, or you want to go with the playoff optimism?
I mean, let's talk about Singer. I mean, despite what some of the haters out there, none of them on this podcast, of course, but Singer has been good this year. He's been consistent. Like, we can argue or we can be exasperated by what he doesn't do in terms of throwing a third pitch, but if you just evaluate what he has done, he's arguably the best number 3 starter in. I mean, you could make East from as the best number 3 starter in baseball, right? Which, I mean, is a testament to his teammates. But this is why the Royals, despite their offense drive, just completely, crapping the bed until the last game in Colorado. Despite a bullpen that is just, has no star talent at all. Although we'll see about Kris Bubic. But despite all of that, the Royals are still in the thick of a playoff race because the rotation is so good. It's, none of us saw it being this good. We all thought, okay, well, Cole Reagans should be good. We hoped Seth Lugo would be good. We knew Brady Singer could do this. We thought Mike Walker could. We hoped Alec Marsh could be competent. But to have all of those things line up and happen in the same year is why, has just defined this entire season, has defined this podcast for 3 months. But Brady Singer is, he's really good. He's not this good, but very few pitchers are this good, like ERA under 3 good. He's been healthy. He's made every start. Quietly, the Royals now have 3 guys. He went over 100 innings for the season today. They have 3 guys who have thrown over 100 innings. You could say that's a real red flag because it's unlikely these guys can stay healthy all year, but they've done it to this point. They've shown no sign of degradation. In Colorado, all 3 of these guys pitched. Reagans, Lugo, Singer. Lugo gave up, 3 runs in 6 innings, which again, in Colorado is not bad. And Singer gave up 1 in 7 innings. Reagans gave up 2 in 7 innings, and one of those was a home run that the umpires once again boffed when it was clearly fan interference. They're pitching well, and I think Brady Singer is a solid number 3/number 2 guy. And you have him for another 2.5 years. If you can trade him, I think you're trading him you'd be trading him at the peak of his value, but you better get something real for him. I'm like, this guy has absolutely restored his trade value, and is somebody right now is, I think, a critical part of the Royals' playoff hopes for this year and probably for next year too.
Yeah, and I think the question, we've had a couple of people, saying things like, hey, got Kris Bubic for the rotation. You've got other guys. Trade Singer's value's high. I mean, that is the riddle here, right? And I can't remember, did we say it on last week's podcast? I know I talked about it on the radio show, but like, he is kind of with 2 years control. I know I ran this by Jeff Passan. With 2 years control, are you in a situation where it's either trade him or extend him, right? Like, just getting the 2 years is not enough, or has he already pitched his way beyond the idea of extending him? You needed to do that with a leap of faith last offseason. And now he's going to demand so much that you're not going to want to do it. Then at that point, and if you make an offer to sign him and he says no, does that take you to the other one? Okay, we got to trade him, because I think the Royals have got to start being much more Rays-like, in the sense that they get returns beyond just a sandwich pick, right, when guys leave in free agency. Like, they've got to move them for real prospects.
So to make it clear, we're talking about 2 years after this year. Right now it's 2.5 years, which is important. That the time he spent in the minors, was it last year? I think it was briefly last year, was enough to give the Royals another year of service time of club control. So he's 2.5 years. I don't think you've missed the window. Like, if you want to extend him this winter, you can. And to me, the canonical example of this both ways, both in terms of extending a guy or trading a guy, is Zack Greinke. Zack Greinke got his 4-year original contract extension after, I believe, the 2008 season, right before he went supernova and won the Cy Young. Like, you talk about great timing. They got that contract extension done right before he won the Cy Young award, but he was 2 years away from free agency. He would have been a free agent after the 2010 season. They got him signed to a 4-year deal, no opt-outs or anything after the 2008 season. So 2 years to go. He signed for 2 additional years. Then he won a Cy Young. Then another year, which was disappointing. Then he was 2 years away from free agency again. This time, though, he made it clear he was not going to resign. And he, hinted to the Royals that they might be better off trading him now while they had while he had trade value. So, anytime Zach Greinke wants to move into the front office and start giving general managers ideas, I'm all for it, because that led to, the second greatest trade in Royals history. But the point is that is an inflection point, but we're not there yet. Like the Royals, if the right trade offer comes across in the middle of the season, great, but it's so hard to trade a guy with his value while you're in a race mid-season. Not to say it can't happen. We talked about it a lot, we've talked about it in the past with trading for a hitter. But realistically, I think that they're probably going to hold him for now. And then this winter, especially with Kris Bubic ready to go back into the rotation, explore whether or not they want to extend him, or it's time to cash him in for prospects and or young hitters, with club control that won't necessarily hurt the team next year, but reposition their talent to take advantage of their strength to fill a weakness.
Yeah, no, I look, and Jeff's on board. He says, like the idea, you broach the extension talks. If he won't go for it, then okay, we're probably going to trade him at some point. And this one, I'm big in Japan. There's what I had to figure it out a minute. This is like Passon saying there's not much value you would get from him in a trade by just waiting a year, right? Like I think what Passon said was there's not much, you don't lose any value waiting a year. I disagree. I don't agree with that. And I didn't have it out with Jeff on that front, but I don't think that's true. I think everybody wants control. I think in particular, if you're going to call the Reds or the Pirates or some of the teams that look like they're close, that want to compete, like they're just buying him to have him for the 2 years. They're not even going to try to extend. Their whole idea is you just need a good pitcher for 2 years because that's our window, and then we're going to be tearing it down and rebuilding anyway. I think those teams want multiple years. So if you want to get them interested, the extra year helps. Like waiting until you get to 1 year out, I disagree.
Yeah, no, the difference between 2 years and 1 year is absolutely significant. The difference between 2 years and 3 years, I think with hitters, it is significant. With pitchers, I mean, look, every year of club control helps. It's always good to have options. But I think with pitchers, all teams work under the assumption that predicting, the farther you're predicting into the future, the more likely something bad will happen, right? A pitcher will have Tommy John surgery. A pitcher will just lose his velocity, et cetera, et cetera. There is a law of diminishing returns, I think, with pitchers. I don't think 5 years is that much worth more than 4 or whatever. But between 2 and 1, absolutely. That's why I think that this is the inflection point this winter. If you really want to maximize value, you got to trade at the 2-year mark. The value goes down rapidly as club control decreases below 2 years.
Yeah, no, I agree. And so, again, somebody said, well, why are we talking about trading him? No, John, we're talking about signing him. But if he won't sign, you have to have your price. And if he thinks his price is way more than what you think it is, you got to have a plan B. And plan B is that he can't just walk after 2 years. He's got to be traded. And I think that's where the Royals have to get to. They got Bobby Witt Jr. signed. If he wouldn't have signed, they'd have to be looking at trading him. The good news is he signed. We don't need to talk about that anymore. We had those conversations about Bobby Witt Jr., and certainly Brady Singer is not above those conversations. Every player the Royals have, that should be the view. I can't stress this enough. The Dayton Moore, you buy a shirt, you're going to be able to wear that jersey, with that player's name on the back for years, is not a recipe for long-term success. Okay? You need to buy the shirt because it says Royals on the front, and you need to enjoy that you've got some retro old school stuff, some guys that got dealt, because the only way this team is going to contend year in, year out is if they move players on a regular basis. It's the only way to do it. You cannot, the Royals have proven you cannot draft your way to consistent success.
In a way, the fact that we are constantly talking about trading players, whether it's Brady Singer now or, like you said, even Bobby Witt before he signed, in a way, it is a compliment to JJ Piccolo that we believe, you and I believe, that he understands the importance of transactionality in treating, even your best players like potential assets if you want to maximize your chances of winning, right? Like if Dayton Moore were still in charge, I don't think we'd be having these conversations. We'd know that there's no chance of that happening. I think Witt obviously was a special case, both in terms of the importance of getting him signed, but also the potential trade, value you could get in return if you had moved him. Fortunately, it worked out perfectly. Just like we talked about, they signed Zach Greinke just in time. They kind of did that with Bobby Witt. Like, we all thought he would take a step forward, but look, even the most optimistic Royals fan, I don't think could have predicted the numbers that Bobby Witt has put up over the 92 games of this season so far. So the fact that he's already, because that contract would not be smaller today than it would have been 4 months ago. Like, they got that done at the right time. But with a guy like Brady Singer, who's, not at that level in terms of talent, that's no insult to Brady Singer. He's a very good player, just not a guy we're already talking about Hall of Fame, 3 years into his career. And also, he's a pitcher, right? So again, there's risk there. You have to look at him as an asset. Also, you're suddenly dealing with a rotation that is a strength, and that, Kris Bubic should be in that rotation next year. Kyle Wright, who they signed in the offseason with an eye towards having him healthy for 2025 as well. So even if Maikel Wacha opts out, which he might, I would say right now it's honestly too early to tell. He may or may not decide to opt out. But even if he does, the Royals probably have two guys ready to go back in that rotation next year. So yeah, thinking proactively, thinking ahead, I think it's perfectly reasonable. I just think to do so in the midst of a pennant race, you really have to find the perfect hitter to trade for that helps you this year, down the stretch. And doesn't hurt your chances of making the playoffs.
I want to come back to what you said about Bobby Witt Jr. here real quick in a second. But first, I don't think Brady Singer's going anywhere, because I think that's, you've said it a number of times, that's the kind of deal you make in the offseason. Right. Like that. I don't think you get the return that you need if you're trying to move him now. I think you do that in an off season and you get, the bigger offer, and you can put, minor leaguers with big leaguers. And right now you're trying to win. I mean, right now people are either buying or selling. And I don't think it'd be really tough to match up with a club that would give you what you would want to sell him. Right. First of all, I don't believe that this organization is yet ready to just embrace the analytics and make a deal that harms them. I don't think there's any way they're looking at this year. As many people said, do they even win 80 games? Somebody put up there, my optimism meter is at 1.5. We'll have to get to your number on that here in a little bit. But, all these things, okay, I can make a strong case towards selling, right? That if you sell right now, that's the best thing to do for the organization long-term, that you're not going to make it this year. And let's be clear, if they don't make the playoffs, everybody's going to say, well, they should have sold at the deadline. Well, here we sit. Now is the time that you got to start making those decisions. I don't think there's any way they're going to do it. I think that's a little bit concerning, because I think they should embrace the analytics part of it. Number two, I don't think there's a good matchup for Brady Singer.
Right.
I don't think somebody's going to give up what it is you want. So I don't think you're going to make that fit. And then number three, I think you ought to be looking at signing him, because there's really not that much mileage on the arm. So I kind of like the Zach Greinke plan you said. Let's try to get him signed and add some years to it. And if we need to trade him a year or two from now, when he's still got more club control because we've extended him, we can still move him then. I like that idea, particularly if John Sherman's going to eat money in deals, then that makes it even easier along the way to get better prospects. But go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, with Brady, ultimately, the idea of signing him long-term, it comes down to a couple things. One is, as exasperating as it is for that, he still will not use a third pitch very often. You can look at it as actually a positive leading indicator, in the sense that going forward, the fact that he's had this much success, still relying on those two pitches 90% of the time, suggests that there is still upside there if he ever does master a third pitch. I mean, he's only 27. There are a lot of guys who learned a third, just a masterful third pitch, in their late 20s. Guys learn a splitter. A splitter would actually be a really awesome pitch for him to pick up. Or just a devastating changeup. Going back decades, Ken Hill, Esteban Loaiza. These are guys late in their career, not late, but like mid-career, learned a third pitch and just completely took a step forward. There's always that possibility. And then you make the point, his arm has been fairly, resilient, healthy. It's not been overworked. Last year's struggles, I think, can really be traced back to the World Baseball Classic just kind of completely messing with his rhythm, and he came into the season not ready. But ultimately, the Royals know better than anybody how healthy that arm is. So if they believe strongly that that arm is going to hold up, because that to me is the number one reason why you would not extend him, right? If you're worried about him breaking down, if you're worried about his elbow going out and missing a year, then ultimately, yeah, that doesn't make sense to me. Then you're better off looking to cash him in now. But I would not be averse to keeping him around another 4 years.
I do want to. Yes, I'm not. That'd be my first choice. Would be to get him signed. But if that doesn't work, it's not just signed, no matter what the cost, right? But so
Sure.
you have to get it. Somebody said, well, why aren't we talking about trading Seth Lugo here? Well, I mean, who do you think has more value on the market, Lugo or Singer? You're like, oh, Lugo's great. Well, Lugo's 34. Singer's 27. Lugo has 1 year of team control with a player option. Singer has 2 years. I mean, so that's one of the reasons why.
Well, also though, but who has more value for the Royals in a playoff race right now is probably also Seth Lugo. So on the one hand, he might have less trade value and yet also be more important to you right now.
Right.
So
Right.
Singer makes the most sense.
I did want to make the point you brought up Bobby Witt Jr. and his contract. Can we just take a moment? I mean, we did in the offseason celebrate that the contract was done, but also say, man, what if you could have got this done a little bit earlier? What if you overpaid what you wanted to pay him last year, but it was enough to get him signed? Wouldn't it be better? And that would be great. Like in all worlds, I will say I talked to a number of people that Bobby Witt Jr. and his people felt he would be better and that he would have more leverage, and they didn't want to sign 2 years ago. But let's celebrate. The Royals signed him, and to your point, I want to underscore he would get a lot more now. The season he is having would make him a lot more expensive and would put him a year closer to getting to free agency as to whether or not he'd even want to mess with signing or have the years that are out there. Maybe you could thread a needle, and J.J. Picollo maybe could have got this done a year earlier, but it looks like J.J. Picollo did this perfectly. He got enough proof that the kid was for real and worthy of a lot of money, right. And now he's proving to be even better than what you got him for. That's as good as it gets.
Yeah, no, I think that's reasonable. I mean, let's put it this way. If he had not signed this winter, I really don't think the Royals would have been able to sign him at all. Like, I think we would be praising this incredible MVP caliber season, the best season by a Royal maybe since George Brett, while at the same time already having that sense of dread that he's 3.5 years away from free agency, which means that as soon as this winter, we should be talking about trade possibilities, right? Like to trade him while you can. The price tag, the Royals, you said talk about threading the needle. The Royals got him, at just the right time in the sense of he got paid fairly. Nobody's claiming he got a hometown discount, and yet the Royals could still afford it. Like 35 million, I think he tops out at roughly, but like that's in 5 years, 5 to 10 years with inflation. That's like 20, 28, 30 million today. Like the Royals can afford a contract like that if it's a generational superstar. But if it had been 40 or 45 million, then that would have been a lot more difficult. Or if would have had to have committed to him until he's 40 years old instead of 36 or whatever. So yeah, we should be. I mean, it's so far, everything about Bobby Witt, from the amount of improvement he has shown every year of his career to the contract to what he's done since he signed that contract, just makes you think. I bought, after he signed that contract, I bought an authentic Royals Bobby Witt jersey. It's only the second one I've ever had. I had a Zach Greinke one after he signed his contract. I have Bobby Witt's, and I never regretted buying Greinke's, and I don't think I'll ever regret having a Witt jersey. So that's what he means to this organization.
What a true honor for Bobby Witt.
Maybe the greatest of all.
Yeah, the greatest honor he could receive. Forget about that all-star game. By the way, with free consultations, no commissions, and in-house crews, Gann Asphalt and Concrete is your one-stop shop. One contractor, all things parking lot. Every project comes with a written warranty. Gann Asphalt keeps your parking lot safer, helps you and your business avoid unnecessary delays and costly expenses. Get that seal coating done now. No, it didn't seem like it's going to be hot. We still got a lot of hot days, but you let it go, and then all of a sudden the cold weather. That's one of the things. All of a sudden everyone's calling, wants to get in before the weather turns cold. You get it in right now, nice and easy, if that's all you need done. Striping, concrete bumpers, all of it, everything that comes with the parking lot, they do it, and do it better than anyone else. That's why they've been solving parking lot problems since 1994. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com. That's GannAsphalt.com. Playoff optimism meter, where are you?
Wasn't a good week, Soren. And I'm just worried this team is leaking oil week after week, and the offense scoring 3 runs in the first 2 games in Colorado, against a Rockies pitching staff, I'm worried. So I'm dropping a full point down to 4.
Yeah. You're down to 4. By the way, I do like this. I want to add this in because Blake is a friend of the podcast. Says, is there anything wrong with just standing pat? Agree with what's been said on not buying, but the rentals probably won't fetch much at all, and the other guys should still be contributors next year. No, there's not. I mean, you don't have to do a deal. There's nothing wrong with it. But if you can make your club better, you need to consider
Well,
it.
ultimately, part of the reason why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling now is thinking that maybe the reason why the Royals haven't made a trade is because they feel like they might be better off just not making it. They just can't. They don't have enough talent in the farm system. That's the original sin of this, organization the last couple of years. That's tying JJ's hands a little bit, is they just don't have a ton of talent to trade to get a real impact guy. If you can't get an impact guy, maybe you're just better off riding with what you've got.
What was your number?
4.
You're down to a 4?
Down to a 4.
You've now reached where I'm at.
Are you a 4?
I'm at a 4. I'm at
Okay.
a 4. I could have gone lower. Where's the Fangraphs number now?
So Fangraphs is down as of today. This includes all the games today. The Red Sox beating the Yankees 2 out of 3 because the Yankees are assholes, and even when we want them to win, the rare time they screw us over. 28%, 28.2%. The Royals are to make the playoffs. The Twins, I should point out, who are 3 games ahead in the standings, they have them at 85.5%. They're saying the Twins are 3 times more likely than the Royals to make the playoffs, which, is not just because they're 3 games ahead. That's largely because their model says the Twins are a significantly better team on paper than the Royals. So let's, hope that assumption is wrong. But algorithmically speaking, the Twins, if anything, I think the main competition right now for the Royals is not the Twins at all. It's the Red Sox. And that's why we'll get to it. But this week's series in Boston to end the first half of the season is going to be very, very important.
Yeah, because we could point to, you and I were talking about, we could point to see, the Astros coming, but the Astros figured to go by the Mariners, and then the Royals are competing with the Mariners, who right now have the exact same record as the Royals.
Right, exactly.
So I think really what we're going to be seeing is we're going to see the Mariners, the Red Sox, the Royals 3 for 1, or throw in the Twins and 4 for 2.
Yeah, or throwing the Astros if you want it. Just there is a chance they'll fall off, but 4, even there, 4 for 2. Right. So it's nice that the Mariners are falling off, because it does mean that one of those 2 teams, Mariners and Astros, has to win the division. So as long as you can stay ahead of either one, you're fine. So we have to hope the Twins hit a pothole, or we have to get ahead of the Red Sox. And then you have to hope that, the Rays, the Blue Jays, the Tigers, none of these teams get hot. So there has been some separation here. There's some of these teams that were in the race 2 weeks ago, like the Blue Jays, are, on the verge of selling. But realistically, it's the Red Sox, the Royals, and then the Mariners / Astros. And you have to stay ahead of both the Red Sox and either the Mariners or Astros.
Yeah, or get in front of the Twins.
Yeah,
and I'm not sold on the Twins. I know the models had them higher, but I do think that there are flaws. There are guys that were, part of there are guys they've sent down. 2 of their premium young hitters have been sent to the minors and are showing no signs of coming back. Right, so they're not as good as what they looked like on paper. I just know that because I had both jackasses on my fantasy team. Okay, so they're not as good as what the models predicted going into the year. So just saying, well, they were supposed to be better before the year, so it's all going to come together. You can't say that, right? Like, guys got to show up. And there's no doubt that Lugo has proven to be better. Singer has proven to be better. The Royals were right on some of the models. The Royals, they may not be the 95 win. They're not, I don't think, the 95 win team that they were kind of pacing for at one point. They're better than their preseason model, and I don't think the Twins are as good. So I am not giving up hope on the Twins. I'm also not giving up hope that the Guardians won't hit a skid.
I mean, the Guardians are as vulnerable as the Twins. The problem with the Twins, like you said, is that yes, they'll have hitters who come up and who have been disappointing, but they keep coming up with hitters that you don't expect. I mean, Jose Miranda just tied the all-time major league record with hits in 12 consecutive at-bats. Their third baseman hitting 328 with a 901 OPS. That's not fair. And they just brought up Brooks Lee, who was the 8th pick in the draft 2 years ago. Gavin Cross was the 9th pick in the draft. The Royals have this long history of having the guy that was drafted 1 pick ahead of them turning into a great player. And Brooks Lee, who was having a very good year, as a prospect in AAA. Coming in today was 7 for 15 with a home run, a 1204 OPS in 4 games in the major leagues. But it's 4 games. But the point is, like, he might be an everyday guy for them in their lineup now. Like, I am worried the Twins are going to start running away with it a little bit. But we're at the point now, 70 games are left in the season. One cold stretch could really hurt them. So if they hit a pothole, if the Guardians go into a slump, I mean, there's a scenario where the Yankees start to fall apart. I mean, the Yankees coming into the season, I did not see them being much above 500. They really shocked everybody. I mean, and yes, Aaron Judge and Juan Soto looks great, but like, they were getting ridiculous pitching performances from the likes of Nestor Cortez has been great, and Luis Gil has been like a rookie out of nowhere. He's like 29 years old or 26 years old and one of the best rookies in baseball. And they're falling apart. So, there's always, when you're talking about 6 teams making the playoffs, there's a lot of different paths to get there. But just to simplify things, assuming nothing really bizarre happens, you got to get ahead of the Red Sox. You got to stay ahead of at least one of the Mariners and Astros. It means you've got to be a better than 500 team the rest of the way. We're not coasting in there with 500 anymore. They've got to win probably at least 88 and probably closer to 90 or 91 games.
I'll say this. I know we're all leaning for the All-Star break here. We know most people, I'm sure, after an off day tomorrow at St. Louis for 2. We, by the way, recording on Sunday. If you're catching this podcast later in the week, Tuesday and Wednesday at St. Louis, and then 3 at Boston. Finish up important games, right? You need to at least go 3-2 there. It'd be great if you could go 2-1 against Boston. 4-1 would be fantastic. That's great. But let me tell you what's coming up after the break. Here is a reason for optimism, because I don't think anybody's looked that far ahead. They open the second half with 3 against the White Sox at home, 3 against the Diamondbacks, who are well below 500, or right at 500. The Cubs for 3. They're like 5 below 500. At the White Sox for 3. At the Tigers for 4. That's a nice stretch.
That is a nice stretch.
That's a get healthy stretch. Boston for 3 at home, St. Louis at home, 5 games just like they've got, 3 with Boston, 2 with St. Louis. Before at Minnesota, at Cincinnati, and Angels, Phillies will be tough. At Cleveland, at Houston, that'll be tough. But at least immediately following, there's a stretch in there, because there's a stretch that comes up that's Philly, Cleveland, Houston, Cleveland, Minnesota, Yankees. Like, that's get ready for your end of August and beginning of September, because it's going to be tough. But, there's a stretch coming where they could get hot again and get some confidence going, and hopefully head into the All-Star break or head into the trade deadline and say, okay, we can make a deal, because we feel good about where this team's going. So the schedule will soften up a little bit.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think, it's important also to keep in mind, they still have all 6 of their games left against Boston. They have, I believe, 6 games left against the Twins. Those are the 2 teams that you're looking at are probably most important from a head-to-head perspective. And in both cases, they play on the road first, and then they play at home later. So if the Royals can go into Boston and win 2 out of 3 this weekend to finish out the first half, that would be enormous. It's a really weird week, because they have an off day Monday and Thursday, because the Cardinals are the one National League team. I believe the way the schedule works is you play 3 games against every National League team, except for your one designated rival where you play 4. Why they still do that, I don't really know why the difference between 3 or 4. It means that you get guaranteed home games against that team every year, but it's 2-2. And so that 2-game series messes everything up. But it's really kind of annoying to have 2 off days and then the All-Star break. Like, you would love to have a two off day week. It's almost like a bye week right before your bye week. Or, in football, it's like having a bye week and then coming back and playing on or playing a Thursday night game and then having a bye week. Like, it's too much rest concentrated in one time. You'd really like to have that spaced out more. But the advantage is the Royals will go into that Red Sox series. The Red Sox play Thursday. The Royals do not. So they will have a rested bullpen. They have Reagans and Lugo both pitching in the Red Sox series, which, that's all you could ask for. It hasn't worked out great so far this season in terms of I believe Royals are 20-18 when Reagans and Lugo start, even though they have combined for like a 2.72 ERA. I mean, just not taking advantage of their performance to a greater degree has really been a shame. But they have.
But you know what? But that is baseball. As a guy who bet religiously baseball for several years. I watched all those trends. And you get in your head that Pedro Martinez at the peak of his powers, they were 32-2 when he started games, and they're not. That's not how it works.
No, you're right.
And today more than ever, you got to have the bullpen. We know what the problem is here, the bullpen. And it's why you bet against guys that lay numbers today. It's why I play dogs or mild favorites only when I bet baseball, because bullpens will crap it away. And so,
well, certainly this team capable of doing that with their bullpen. But also, keep in mind, they have a better record, 29-25 in games where Riggins and Lugo don't start. So with Singer, Marsh, Waka, and then Daniel Lynch and Jonathan Bolin, they still have a better record. So it's worked out. But still, they have Riggins, Lugo, and Singer. I believe it's going to be the same three in the Rockies series, lined up against Boston. Boston, I believe Tanner Houck, their ace, is not pitching in that series. It's going to be Brian Bello and I want to say Cutter Crawford, who started today, and then possibly Josh Winkowski, who's kind of moved into that rotation. But the point is, the Royals have their best starters lined up. The Red Sox do not. So there's a good chance for them to win 2 out of 3. And winning right now, that series takes on a huge amount of importance, because the odds that it's going to come down to the Red Sox and the Royals at the end is really high. So I know the Cardinals is what everyone's geared up for, and that's great. But like, if you're thinking playoffs, the Cardinals are irrelevant. If you're thinking pride and Missouri bragging rights, great, and I certainly want to beat them. But it's the Red Sox series that's going to matter.
Salvador Perez went by 1,500 hits. By the way, we're proudly brought to you by our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete here on the Kaufman Corner podcast. You can find them online at GannAsphalt.com. 1,500 hits for a catcher. He's at 260 home runs, I think, roughly, for his career, 209 as a catcher. The record for home runs by a catcher, I believe, is 396 by Mike Piazza, who had almost every one of his home runs as a catcher. But there are plenty of guys that didn't put up all their numbers. They DH'd and played some first base as well. But Salvador Perez, the 1,500 hits, the home runs, the fact that he's in his 8th All-Star game this year, the Silver Slugger awards that he has, a 48, a season where he led the league in home runs and RBIs. Where do you sit? Even though he has no other RBI season over 80 in his career and has an on-base percentage just over 300. I was getting this everybody said absolutely not, because his on-base percentage would kill him. And now some of the people that were saying that are now saying he's in. Where do you sit on Salvador Perez and what the 1,500 hits means?
It's really interesting to see the narrative about Salvador Perez in the Hall of Fame change over the last. I mean, it's probably changed every year since 2020, where I think going in, certainly after he missed an entire season with Tommy John surgery in 2019, I don't think anybody was talking about Hall of Fame with him. And then he comes back and he hits 333 in an abbreviated season. Then he's leads the American League in home runs and RBIs, and resurrects his career. But even as recently as 18 months ago, I still think it was very much a long shot. But he keeps putting up the numbers. Obviously, he's been in a slump the last 6 weeks, but this year putting up some of the best numbers of his career at age 34 is really, and the Royals being good, I think has really opened up the conversation again. And the problem is, catchers are such a unique breed when it comes to Hall of Fame voting, because they don't play every day. Salvador Perez notwithstanding, although in his case, of course, he's DHing a lot in order to do that. But like historically, Yogi Berra was not playing 162 games a year. And so if you look at things like wins above replacement, which we use as, a general measure, is this guy Hall of Fame caliber, at least when you look at the way Hall of Fame voters have voted over the years, catchers are in their own category. Yadier Molina does not meet the wins above replacement standard for catchers, but I don't think anybody thinks he's not getting in, quite possibly on the first ballot, because there are things that catchers do above and beyond, wins above replacement in terms of their leadership skills, even if they're not playing every day. So I think Salvador Perez has opened up the conversations to the point where, worst case scenario, I think that 20 years from now, every time the Veterans Committee or whatever the version of Veterans Committee they have then meets, his name will come up. My concern, my fear is that he will suffer the fate of somebody whose name you probably know, but is not a name you probably hear very often, Bill Freehan. I don't know if you recall. He was the Tigers catcher from 1963 to 1976 and is, probably the best catcher in terms of, career performance who's not in the Hall of Fame. And there are a lot of similarities. Both of them played for one team for their entire career. Bill Freehan was a really good power guy and he played in the 60s, a really low offense era, really underrated as a hitter. Went to 11 All-Star games. Like if there is an argument for Bill Freehan, in fact, I think, he's probably one of
You're
the
the
guys.
guy who's clearly going to make it.
I would think that, Bill Freehan is definitely, it's kind of surprising he hasn't gotten in. I mean, he passed away a few years ago, sadly. So if he does get the honor now, it's really kind of a shame, but he still probably deserves to be in there. And if he was 5% better, if he had lasted 2 more seasons, he probably would have gotten in. 11 All-Stars, is a lot of All-Star games to make for a guy who didn't make the Hall of Fame. He won a World Series in 1968, just like Salvi did. And, like I said, do you think playing for one team his entire career would, be a bonus? But the thing that stands out, I think, certainly for the voters of his era, because he was on the ballot in the 80s, he finished his career with 1,591 hits. And, we've, I think, evolved to understand that hits is, by itself is a really weak way to validate a guy's career or to evaluate his Hall of Fame chances. But 1,591 is a really low hit total for a Hall of Famer. Of course, he's a catcher. He's not playing every day. And his value was not in his batting average, and he played in a low offense era, all of those things. But 1,591. The difference, though, is his last season was his age 34 season. Right? Salvi now is 34 years old and shows no signs of this being his last season. So I really do think what Salvi needs is 2 more productive years after this one and or some sort of signature playoff run. Like he has reached the point now where the numbers are almost irrelevant for Salvi. I think that the numbers with the right narrative of leadership, of moments, postseason success, etc. Like if the Royals win, even if he doesn't play well, he will be the catcher. He'll be the captain of a team that had another playoff run, 9 years after their last run. I think that could really make a difference for his Hall of Fame narrative in 10 or 15 years.
I will subscribe to the thing you said right there, that the numbers start to become irrelevant if he does get to and make a run in the playoffs.
Yes.
There's another, if he's playing in an LCS or something, or maybe a couple of them, then yes, I think that will do it. If they don't get back to the playoffs, I think there are some signatures. By the way, I looked up today amongst Hall of Fame catchers. Do you know where Salvi's 260 home runs would rank amongst just Hall of Fame catchers?
I mean, it's high. It's got to be top 5. I mean, there's Piazza, there's
number
Fisk.
7. He would
7?
be tied.
Not even that.
He'd be exactly tied with Roy Campanella with 260. Here are the only catchers in front of him: Ivan Rodriguez 311, Gary Carter 324, Yogi Berra 358, Carlton Fisk 376, Johnny Bench 389, and 427 from Mike Piazza. Those are the only ones that are ahead of him.
So he's 51 away from being in the top 5. Okay, 2 more good years.
Yeah, 2 more good years. I mean, I think if he's not going to make it, he needs to get to 300 home runs. That's the one thing that list right there tells me, is that 300 is kind of a benchmark for catchers. He needs to get to 300 home runs. I think he probably needs to get to 2,000 hits. His 1,500 hits right now amongst Hall of Fame catchers would rank him 16th.
How many Hall of Fame catchers have less?
The only ones that have less, Roy Campanella, who died.
Okay.
And had an accident.
Had an accident. Ended his career very young, yes.
Right. 1422. Ray Schulk had 1345. He played in the 19 teens and 20s.
Yeah.
1252 for a guy named Roger Bresnahan.
Yeah, 19th century guy. Yeah.
The bottom line is everybody was done by 1947. Biz Mackey.
That's a Negro Leagues player. So
1,011 hits. Josh Gibson, Negro Leagues player, 808 hits. And then Luis Santop, 111 hits.
Okay.
So I think he needs 2,000 hits. I think he needs 300 home runs. I think he needs 1,000 RBIs. He's at 870 something on the RBIs. I think he really needs to get to 1,000 RBIs, because 1,000 RBIs gives you a little bit more cachet. 1,019 10th Roy Campanella, 1179 9th Gabby Hartnett. 1,200 really would be better. So again, I'm with you. If he can get most of the numbers and maybe some playoff runs, I think he looks a lot better.
Well, what we're saying is he needs 40 more homers, 133 RBIs, and 500 hits. All of that is basically this season and 2 more seasons of just decent production. I think the numbers will be there. And then, like I said, he needs probably another playoff run.
Yeah, I'd feel better if he was at 1,100, 1,200 RBIs. So I'd like to see the RBIs keep happening, which he's doing this year. I'd like to see a couple of more 90-plus RBI seasons. Love to see another 100 RBI season in there. I think that would be great.
Do you realize he's gotten above 80 RBIs
once
in his career?
Yeah, I said 80, that earlier. Thanks for listening.
Yes. Well, I'm just reiterating because of how ridiculous. Like, I would never have guessed that, right? You obviously had 121 the 1 year, but it also speaks to how hard it is as a catcher if you're not playing. If RBIs is a counting stat, so if you're playing 140 games, you're not going to get as many as if you play 155 games, and that's the difference. So he's on pace this year to have the second most RBIs of his career pretty comfortably.
He's not on pace for 100 RBIs this year. He's got 55 right now, right?
Yeah, but I mean, that's very close. He's like on pace for like 98 or something like that.
55 in 91 games?
Mm-hmm.
Is that where they're at right now?
Yeah, 92. I could do the math. Did he have an RBI today?
I'll do it.
I'd have to look. 97 is what I get him on pace for.
Yeah, I do too. That's more than I thought. I didn't realize it. Yeah, I hope he gets there. I'm rooting for him.
Yeah.
Like, trust me, I'm not hating on him. I'm trying to make the case to get the guy in there.
Yeah, no. I mean, I think the case, like we're both saying here.
I'm talking to the comments. I'm on Team Salvi. Trust me.
But he needs 2 more good years, and he needs a playoff run. I think that's the formula. And I think if he does that, I think he'll get in. It'll be a controversial selection. Maybe not analytically the analyst choice, but I will not be on team analyst for that one. I can promise you that. I would love to see him in the Hall. Let's
talk about the bullpen. Kris Bubic is in an inning, 2 Ks, looked really good. Had a couple of wild ones there early in the first batter, I think, but did the job. I want to tie in the fact that Walter Pennington went down. And I know it's a numbers game and he's got options and so on and so forth. At some point, the best have to be up there, though, if you're going to make a run. And there's no doubt that he is better. Would you agree than some of what's up there on the bullpen?
I mean, look, so before we get to Bubic, let's talk about Pennington, because my concern with him was simply, what exactly is his velocity? Because there's a difference between a lefty throwing 91 and a lefty throwing 93. I mean, that's basically the difference between Will Smith on opening day when he was, not worthy of being on the roster, let alone closing, and the Will Smith of the last month or 6 weeks who's been a useful reliever. And so I was very happy to see that Pennington was not throwing 91. His fastball was consistently 93 to almost 94. I think 93 and a half or so. He faced 2 batters. That's not all I can read from that. But that slider was no joke. And remember, this is in Colorado where breaking pitches do not break as much because the air is thinner. I was worried about, I made the joke of, poor guys, getting his major league debut just in time for Colorado to pitch in Colorado. Now, obviously, he's from Colorado. He pitched in front of his family. He was on the roster for 1 day. So I'm thrilled for him that it worked out. But I was just concerned that he might not look good in the Colorado air. He missed bats. He got a strikeout out of the 2 batters he faced. The Royals need a guy who can miss bats. He's leading AAA in strikeout rate. So yes, I think he needs to be on this roster. I think Kris Bubic needed to be on the roster even more. And Bubic today wasn't throwing 93. I think his first fastball was like 93 and a half. But by the end of the outing, he was hit consistently 94 and a half to 95, which, consistent with what we saw from him last year, plus maybe an extra mile or a mile and a half because he's throwing out of the bullpen. And like his best pitch might have been his changeup, because he got both of his strikeouts on a changeup. He also got, I think, the pop out. All 3 of the outs came on changeups. Stuff was nasty. And I think he threw 1 slider. Again, he's in Colorado. If you have a changeup in altitude, that's the pitch you want to go to as your off-speed pitch, because you don't have to worry so much about how much spin it gets. But Bubic looked nasty today. I really hope they use him for multiple innings. My concern is that the last week or two in AAA, he was mainly throwing just one inning. But I think the Royals would be best off if they had both of these guys on the active roster. And at some point, they are going to have to decide, are they really going to stick with, pick a guy, Nick Anderson, John Schreiber, Chris Stratton over Walter Pennington, right? And yes, maybe that's an overload of lefties because you've already got Sam Long has pitched very well. They have Bubic there now. Angel Serpa, I think, deserves to stay on the roster. And then there is Will Smith. That would literally be 5 lefties in your bullpen. That I can't. I have to admit, I can't think of a team that carried 5 left-handed relievers. But you're not using them as like one-out specialists. These are guys who are good relievers who just happen to throw with their left hand. So I understand the reluctance to have 5 lefties, but if they're your best pitchers, there are teams that go into a season and go through an entire season with no lefties on their roster because their best relievers are all right-handed. Like, getting the platoon advantage is nice, but it should never supersede talent. And that's true when they're all right-handers, but it's also true if they're mostly left-handers. If you've got great relievers, if you trust Walter Pennington or Kris Bubic or Sam Long to get lefties and righties out, then I'd rather have them out there than Nick Anderson or Chris Stratton right now.
Do you think he's a candidate to close?
Bubic?
Yes.
I absolutely think he can. The question is he more valuable? Again, because he is left-handed and you have MacArthur, would he be more valuable using him in a role where you're setting up against the lefties? I'm a big believer that your 8th inning guy sometimes is more important than your 9th inning guy. So I almost don't care. Like, I think he should be throwing, based on what we saw today, he should be moved into a high leverage role right away. Whether or not he supersedes MacArthur,
I don't know about right away, but it's looking like that he'll be.
If he continues to pitch like this by the end of the week, yes. Like, should he be ahead of MacArthur? Maybe not, but should he be ahead of Schreiber? Like in the 8th inning right now, we just saw it on Friday. Tie game, 8th inning. John Schreiber comes in, boom, the Royals are down 2 runs. He just doesn't miss bats. I mean, it's so much about missing bats. Bubic missed 2 bats today out of 3 batters. So he needs to be pitching high leverage unless he proves he can't. And I think he will. I think he'll be in that role.
Yeah. All right. You want to finish with anything on Maikel Garcia?
So the one thing I want to say about Maikel Garcia, because he got off to such a good start and, the numbers were solid for so long, it kind of, his decline was subtle in a way. Like, we didn't recognize it in the numbers. I just want to make the point that you could argue there is nobody on the roster who has been more tied to the Royals' fortunes this year than Maikel Garcia. Maikel Garcia, his OPS peaked after the game of May 25th when he was hitting .269 with a .314 on base and a .425 slug. That's a .739 OPS. That's above league average. He was playing a great third base. He had 5 home runs in like 6 weeks. Not coincidentally, that was the day the Royals moved to 34-19, which was their high mark of the season. Their collapse coincides perfectly with Maikel Garcia going from above average regular to quietly one of the worst everyday players in the sport for the last 6 weeks now. Since then, not counting today, we'll see, because today was a landmark day in some ways for him. But since then, over 38 games, he hit 166, 227 on base, and slugged 212. Over 38 games, he has a 212 slugging. He had 0 home runs over a 38 game stretch. Today was the first time. It was only the 3rd game in which he had 2 hits in the last 5 weeks. It was the first time since June 4th he reached base safely 3 times. And he hit his first home run since all the way back on May 17th. And it was in Colorado, and it probably wouldn't have been out if he hadn't been in Colorado, but we'll take what we can get. So, here's hoping that this was a turnaround game for him. He's back to playing third base after starting 10 consecutive starts at second base. CJ Alexander is back in Omaha, and Michael Massey's playing some second. And just leave him at third. I don't understand why it took so long to move him back there, but the Royals desperately need him to be the player he was for 6 weeks. When he was, they were good. When he's not, they've been bad. There's really been a very strong correlation there.
Well, part of
And
that's
they need to
because he's
fix
been
it.
hitting at the top of the lineup during this whole process, almost.
Well, the Royals, their leadoff hitters combined, right? And the problem is every time they move him out. I mean, Adam Frazier started there today; it was 0 for 4, right? Like they have the worst on base percentage of any team in the leadoff spot, except I think for the A's, which is especially critical because Bobby Witt hit second. Like you have like one of the best hitters in the sport right behind your leadoff hitter. Just get that dude on.
Yeah. Get on in front of him, and you're in good shape. Well, Randy's had some power outages. I will tell you that in his area. All
Did
right.
I lose you there?
Yeah, we lost you for a second there, but now we got you. Just get on base because Bobby Witt Jr. is behind you, is what Randy was getting at. And with that, Randy, do you have anything else you want to say beyond get on base in front of Bobby? Well, with that, we'll call it quits because I don't think Randy can hear us anymore. That's going to do it for us. Remember, we're proudly brought to you by our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete with free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews. Every project comes with a written warranty. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, keeping your parking lot safer, helping you and your business avoid unnecessary and costly delays. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com for the good doctor, Dr. Rany Jazayerli. I am Soren Petro saying thank you very much for joining us here on the Kaufman Corner podcast.